Welcome, everyone. Hello again. I have to say, I'm particularly excited for today. We have a very, very special guest. He's known as the creator of Star Trek Starfleet Boot. He's been inducted into the Bata Shoe Museum, serial entrepreneur, designer, collaborator, mentor to design students, and emerging artist. Let's not forget also a father to his beautiful son, Adrian. Ladies and gentlemen, the authentically focused, inspirational powerhouse, George Sully. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Janelle? How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for squeezing us into your very busy schedule. I know that the past few months have been insane for you, but it sounds like you leading up to, the pandemic, you were quite busy anyways. And I want to dive into that a little bit more because embarrassingly, I have to admit, I've been in the shoe industry now, I guess longer than I want to admit, but let's say a solid 15 years. And George Sully is a name that we've heard of in the distance, being part of the footwear industry. And a lot of our viewers and listeners are in the retail, apparel, clothing, and footwear industry. But man, like you are busy. It's
Well,
crazy. And I look at all the TV appearances. You've been in the media a lot lately. Bring us to the beginning. Who is George Sully? How did you come to be? And I know we have something in common. We're both from Ottawa originally,
absolutely,
correct?
absolutely correct.
So how did you become to be? How did you get into footwear and designing footwear? And I
Of
know footwear is not your only thing, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But
course.
let's start at the beginning.
Well, you know what? Yes, we're from Ottawa. So everyone from Ottawa out there, you know what I'm saying? Son from Ottawa. But I've been in Toronto for a good 20 years. I don't want to date myself because I might just be 25 to some people out there. So I want to keep that. But yeah, I started actually in music, and from music, just kind of gravitated because at the time, again, I'm dating myself, but you're making music and you're spending a lot of money in these studios, and then all of a sudden, this crazy idea called Napster came out, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, wait,
Napster, that's a blast from the
right,
past.
isn't it? And then kind of like, wait, like putting up this music for free, we're spending all this money, and then all of a sudden now you can get it for free. And then people started doing a lot of transfers and going from music into fashion. And I know Diddy at the time had a brand that he started because he was a musician, and then he started getting all his friends and participating in all these campaigns that he was doing for this new brand called Sean John all of a sudden. And then I saw that and I said, you know what, the music, where it's going, I had good foresight. Because I'm like, where it's going, it seems that, I won't be able to control people buying or trading my music. So I'm going to make that transition as well. So a lot of my music friends I used on different, in different marketing campaigns for my new clothing line called Lim Apparel. And then from there, that started to grow. So I really took the cues off of Diddy, and then took all, started getting into clothing. And funny enough, I didn't know too much about, I knew what I was doing. I had a good eye. I had, good creative, all that stuff. But the business side of it, I didn't know too much of it. And I remember a good friend of mine, he was a buyer for Athlete's World. And he's like,
Wow.
Sully, like, I love the brand. Like, let's get it in there. I'm like, sure. Okay. What do I need to do? What do I need to do? And I didn't even understand the fact that you had to factor the stuff before you had to, like, it's kind of like how many shirts he's probably going to ask for, probably like 10, 11 t-shirts. You know what I
Think
mean?
again.
I get the PO and it's just like 50 grand worth of, I didn't even understand. I didn't even understand what I was getting into. So there was no banks. I didn't have money in the bank, let alone
Yeah.
so then here I am asking friends around, to help put this order together. I make literally like a factory in my house and to
Oh my
operate.
gosh.
I turned like one of my sections of my apartment into like a factory, like chop, packaging, everything, had girlfriends, guy friends, everyone in a line, chopping labels
That's
off shirts.
awesome.
Anyways, long story short, like I learned my lesson, but the thing is that like I always said to myself, never not take the opportunity, rise to it. Because in the end, I still have photography of what the actual setup in Athletes World actually looked like. I still have that photography. And to look what I was able to do and to achieve is kind of like, you know, perception's everything in business. And if you can fall through and rise to that, then you become at that perception, you become the reality of it. And I know that me saying yes and me saying, you know what, I'll take on that challenge and see what happens. But I rose to it. And it actually did really well at Athletes World. And it taught me a lot of lessons of saying, because I didn't have the opportunity to, I didn't go to school for what I did as much as I had that gumption and I had that creative force. I am a Taurus, so you're gonna have the stubbornness is just built in, right? And
Yeah.
do and go. So, but then that, funny enough, that got a lot of exposure and so on and so forth. But we fast forward the story where a friend of mine and business partner and friend forever, Henry Wong, he saw me at a trade show, and he was doing his thing, and I had like a Limb Apparel sweater or whatever, and he recognized me. He's like, "Hey, I know your brand," and he's like, "I can do shoes. I can make you shoes." And I'm just like, some stranger telling me that they can make me shoes. I'm just like, yeah, right. Because at the time, we're talking about, especially at the time, this is what, 20 years ago? I don't want to date myself again, but this is a long time
We're
ago.
young
So,
pups. We're
yeah,
young pups.
exactly, right? 5 years ago, I met him 5 years ago. No. So then he said, I can make you shoes. And I just didn't believe him, because at the time you had Nike, Reebok, New Balance, like Coke, Pepsi, RC Cola. You know what I mean? Like there's like three power brands. There's
Right.
no way that this guy what he's telling me is true. So then literally after like a good 6 months of him calling me, hey, how are you doing? Send me the files. I was just so nervous to send him anything. So I'm like, I built this brand up, and obviously it wasn't the biggest brand at the time, but it was something. It wasn't nothing. And I'm like, I'm going to give this guy my designs, and then he's just going to go overseas and then just blow up my brand. And then I've already heard those stories, even at the time.
Right.
So finally, what I just did, make a long story even shorter, I just took some Nike SB designs and I just traced Nike SB. I just got rid of the Nike check, and I put Limb, Limb, on the side of the sneaker, and I sent them these Illustrator files, all these line drawings. Here you go. And I left it alone. I'm like, it's done. Like, I'll never hear from him again. And if he does knock it off, then he's knocking off Nike skater shoes. At the time, they're really popular. So then
All
anyway,
right.
a month later, I forget about everything. A month later, I get an email, and boom. In this email is a picture of the sneaker, fully made, with my name on it. I lost my mind. I said, oh my God.
Wow.
It took him a week to get back, because I wanted the samples, to see the samples. But by the time it took him to get back to my house, I already had the logos drawn up, because I said, you know what? I said, never in my life have I given something to somebody outside of myself or outside of my circle and somebody deliver. And when he delivered, I wanted him to basically shut down his operations. And how do you do that? Well, I just said, what do you think of this, Henry? The brand, made up a logo. What do you think of this? Sully Wong. He's just like, that's cool. I said, so yeah, it's me and you. He's like, sure. He's like, he already knew my brand. He already knew what I was doing. So it's kind of like to lock him in, basically to cut the plug,
Yeah. Yeah. Smart.
invite the plug, bring in the plug. And then from there, I'm just like, close your phone number, get a new number, get a new, what's it called? I'm making shoes
You're
now.
mine now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, because he was the only one, especially at the time, who had that type of connection to overseas. And he had lineage, family, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So then cutting the plug, basically, and at the time, a lot of people were knocking off what I was doing in the t-shirts and like the innovations that I was using. I was doing the appliques and a lot of really cool innovations like rubber. Some of the first 3D embroidery I was using. Back then it was like, whoa, that's like far out, like 3D embroidering, right? The puff stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the lacquer and all these other stuff. And people were knocking it off really fast, and that was really killing me. So then once I got into the shoe game, that was it. I'm like, you know what? I hung up Limb Apparel faster you can say what the hell, because I knew that you could not catch me, especially being so young and knowing that, you know, what can I hold on to that is mine, knowing that nobody can come after me, because I know that it was an expensive endeavor. Shoes is like the hardest discipline in fashion to achieve, to actually get any traction. And anybody who gets into shoes understands that. Right
Mm-hmm.
away, you're putting up mortgages every time you put in an order, and the type of money you have to have, and having Henry be there with the connections and cutting a lot of the red tape and making sure that these things come, and like just finishing off the rest of the puzzle for me was
Right.
everything. And he really, I
Right.
can give him the credit for getting me into shoes. So then from shoes, we fast forward into, and then opportunity, publication, Chad Quarterly, which is probably not in your paperwork. I don't know if it is or
It
not, but yeah, okay.
is.
Chad Quarterly.
Got your
And
full
then,
bio here, George.
yeah, okay. You beat me. You beat me. So these are all things that one led into the other, because it's having, people are saying, wow, George, pick a lane. And they always told me that, like, pick a lane. And for me,
No.
I'm like, no. And one day, you know, they will learn that one day, you know what I mean? That it's going to matter. And what happened, I mean, further off in the story, they came up with this crazy name, brand new to the market, called multimedia. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. Finally, there's a name
That
for
is.
me. Finally, there's a name for me, because I'm like, one, I'm not picking a lane. Number two, there's too much creativity going on. And every time I touched something, it was always enough to get me not only to another level, but to fortify what I was doing as a whole. So it's kind of like going from music. I left music behind, but I really didn't, because I tied music into my clothing. When I went into shoes, I didn't really leave the clothing as much as the energy and the connections and the resources got into shoes and manufacturing and all that other stuff. So everything was making a big tableau or a weed, like a blanket, like a woven
Yep.
infrastructure to help, you know, propel me to anything I wanted to do. Because I'd always tell anybody the key to marketing or to development in anything, it's the software, it's the computer. I'm doing all these crazy things. You think I'm doing a lot of crazy things, but it's coming from all the same software and the same computer. I still sit in the same place. It's just my creativity. I'm able to just put it in different places. And the
Mm-hmm.
further you go, the more resources that you have and the more connections you have to make things happen. So you're not alone,
Mm-hmm.
really. I might seem like I'm alone because, you know, I take all the credit to myself. I don't credit anybody. I credit no one.
You know, I think it's quite opposite. And I have to say, to see and to hear about your evolution through the industry, I think that, you know, one of the things that the word that keeps on flashing into my head when I'm speaking with you is modesty. You are so modest with like, well, it's just this thing that happened and I met this guy and I met that guy, and you know, next thing you know, like this led into this. And it's like, no, like you're a genius creator. And I think that not only, you know, I like the multimedia term that's been, you know, that came out just a few years ago, but I remember hearing it for the first time. I'm like, that's smart. That's smart. But when we talk about George Sully, from music to clothing to footwear to, you know, being a philanthropist and also giving back as a mentor as well. You've done work with students from Central Toronto Academy, and and I think that there's just so many different directions that life in the world can propel you into, but I think that you carry with you certain pieces of your experience.
Absolutely.
And I know for a fact, and I think from one entrepreneur to the next, you know, you're talking about the capital that's needed when you first launch a business, and you're the artist that creates, and all of a sudden you get this massive PO that you have to produce, and you find a way to make it happen, you know, and I can relate to that, and I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers can relate to that, because I myself, you know, I was a single mom to a 2-year-old when I remortgaged my house to launch my business, and many don't know that. So there you go. But when you have no other way but up, you make it happen.
That's
And I think that you mentioned the help of so many people that surround you. It's your community. It's your squad that really helps elevate you. And I think, um, I'm sure you'll agree, who you surround yourself with counts
that's
for a
everything.
big part of that, right? Too.
Absolutely.
And anyway, so you're so modest, throughout all of this, but you've acquired some major accomplishments along the way. And I think I was like, that's my man, George, when I saw your partnership with LG.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
huge. So congrats on that.
Yeah, that's
And is
that's
that the bag I see hanging in the background there?
it's not, but it's right
Oh.
here around the corner. Just That's just another project. There's projects all
All
over the place,
right.
flipping all over the place. But yeah, like, these things, and this is what prepares you for these opportunities, because it's kind of like a client can come to me and say, hey, I want to do a collaboration and so on and so forth. In my head, I'm like, it can go any direction. We can do basically anything. And depending on what direction you want to market it, whether it's private label, I'll make you something without my name on it. That's okay, because I do private label, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you want to keep that flavor of some sort of tying to, whether it's the marketing or whether it's just the angles, or just, hey, you guys want to collaborate with me just for sake of putting my name on it, hey, that's great. But I have all those, there's so many directions that we can go, and there's so much directions that how we can work together, and it's okay. Keep my name on it or not, that's cool as well. LG, they came to me and said, hey, we want to do this really cool collaboration for Velvet, the Velvet 5G phone, and so on and so forth. We know that you do, sneakers and whatnot. They're doing clothing. It was Me Bird, which is a brand out of La Belle
Yep.
Province, Montréal,
Ah, yes.
and then Haley, Haley Esser. I don't know how to pronounce her name proper, her last name Esser.
Really,
Esser. Haley. So she's amazing, by the way. But everyone was doing their thing, clothing, so on and so forth. So I'm like, okay, well, sneakers is going to take a little too long, but then backpacks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do some backpacks. And these are the things that, again, if I was a one-trick pony, I would have already lost, because they want to do something not clothing or something different and so on and so forth. But I have those disciplines from all of those years of doing these different things, and everything always comes back. I put it in my, how do I say, my Batman, my utility belt. It never goes away. Like, you have to have your utility belt. Like, it just makes all the sense in the world. Some people, you'll drop it because I have to move on, and wasn't successful over here, so I'm going to quit here and I'm going to start over here. No, just put it in the belt, because it's going to come back around. So then, doing this LG collaboration, I was able to pull from that, and then pull from their phone, and then just really make a cool bag that speaks to their brand, and then speaks to myself and what I bring to the table. And it's the details, and it's the quality, and all these other things that I've been able to finally get to a point where I can be confident and deliver something to a client, or a collaboree. See, I made that own. That's my own word.
Collaboree.
You know what I mean? That's my own word. Don't write it down, Janelle. It's mine. It's mine. And these are all these things. So I've done many collaborations, and it's always a new way of being able to express myself. And these are all things I've been doing since the beginning. Like Lim Apparel, if you look, I actually stuck it on my website as legacy brands now. And I put up some pictures of that time, because even for myself, I realized what I did and brought so many people together from so many different factions and genres, and music wise, and talent, local talent, but then worldwide talent, and bringing them all into one place. It looks like what we're talking about today. And I was doing that 20 years ago, and bringing different ethnicities together, and BIPOC from day one, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
what we talk about now today, it's so funny when you just juxtapose 20 years ago, and it's kind of like, but still back then it was even worse. But again, it's not cry me a river, pull the violins out, and I'm going to sit at home, twiddle my thumbs, and say, I'm not going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do this, and whether it's going to be accepted or not, that's what happens. But I also had the understanding of knowing that I'm going to have to earn to live at the same time. But I never, my first and only job that I've ever had in my life, and I'll say this now, this is something this is breaking news. CNN doesn't even have
All
this.
right.
They wouldn't want it. But anyway, they don't, but they still don't have it. What it is that my only job that I had was when I was 18, and I loved my job, and it was at St. Hubert's. They're gone now.
Oh.
Saint Hubert. Saint Hubert.
You can't beat Saint Hubert.
You can't beat Saint Hubert. You can't beat it. And again, I've always loved to work. I've always been a working beast. So even having that job and it's kind of starting in dish and moving up to the ranks, to the block and all these things, that ended up cooking the chicken by the time, I ended up getting to the top job.
Moving on up.
And it taught me all these things, because while I was doing that, I was doing just about everything else. And I was using those little savings to do a little this, a little that. But I realized that graphic design was really my mainstay, and knowing that I could actually earn, and knowing that it started with flyers, but then flyers turned into corporate stuff, and corporate, I'm like, I could actually make money and become the entrepreneur that, like, it was ingrained in my head by family, and every person in my family is an entrepreneur and or a designer, sculptors. I have everybody, the lineup of my family, we're all entrepreneurs. But I watched my mom and my dad live and work and do these great things and teach us. My mom is a painter. She's a sculptor. She was a caterer. She was a seamstress. I watched all these disciplines in my household. We had like the big easels with like just these great pieces of work. And my dad, jewelry maker, he's an illustrator. He did some sculpting. My brother Rose, sculptor, illustrator. My brother Al, furniture maker, illustrator. We just launched a book. Anyways, another story.
Really?
See, I got you.
Let's make time for that.
Yeah, let's make time. Yeah, we'll make time for that. And my sister, voiceover. My sister's a voiceover artist. She did Canada, the Story of Us on CBC. It was a 10-part series, 2-hour long, and she did all the narration for every part. So it's kind of like just growing up and understanding and knowing that it's kind of just the fearlessness of entrepreneurship and just having that one job and knowing that it was okay for me to leave it, because I had all these other things to make sure to keep me up. What was the main goal, George? Well, the main goal was not only to survive and earn, but just to do what I love.
Yeah.
Just to support, to do what I love, because there's, the entrepreneurs, and then you have the wantrepreneurs, and
wantrepreneurs. I like that term.
Which is not even,
I don't like it.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's not even like it's, and I got that off of Mark from Shark's Tank. He uses it all the time, but a wantrepreneur is just somebody who's just like, who wants to do it, but is still holding tethered to that job, and that's okay. But it's one of those things, but when you get too comfortable in doing the same things and years go by and realizing that you don't let go of that tether, then it's kind of like you're just going to spin your wheels, and you have to jump. You have to leap eventually when whether you put your mortgage, whether you put a mortgage up, or whether you do these things, those are those leaps. And if you don't, then you'll never know. So it's kind of like, for me, I'm like, no, like I will never have another job again, because as long as I can maintain and do what I do and do what I love. And so while Lim Apparel, and then Lim Apparel goes away, then Sully Wong comes in. But then a friend of mine is like, I want to start a magazine. I'm like, I don't even know how to start one, but I know how they look, and I know how to make how it looks. I don't know what to do with a magazine, but I know everybody. I'm connected. I have my clothing is in Got Style, and where they sell $1,000 shoes and suits. My brand is in there already. So let's see. How do you make a magazine? There's these guys that lived in my building. And so Lim Apparel, by the way, Lim Apparel got me, I bought my first house at King and Bathurst 20 years ago. King and Bathurst, 2-bedroom, bathroom on Lim Apparel. So while this is going on, my friend comes down. He wants to start from Ottawa.
Was the factory still in your living room at that time?
No, well, some of it.
Okay.
Some of it. But it was a nice place, though. Like, I'll have to send you pictures. It was nice. Yeah?
I'd love to see it. And George, I don't want to derail you from the track that you're on, because I want to hear this.
I'm glad you are,
I
because it's
want
on forever.
no, but I want to hear this. But at the same time, as an entrepreneur, and especially with the times, and you know, I look at, and I'm thinking of our viewers and listeners who are retailers, who either are retailers or service the retail sector.
Yes,
And, you know, of course, the pandemic has brought on a whole world of challenges.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
your story is incredibly inspirational. And you come obviously from a legacy of entrepreneurs and people who are not afraid of hard work. But let's talk about the challenges. I mean, I'm sure
Sure.
that I know myself. I've hit some pretty hard, taken some pretty hard hits along the way.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
I'm sure for any solid entrepreneurs, it hasn't come, you know, without an element of risk. It hasn't come without tears and blood, sweat, and tears and
Absolutely.
hard work and
Absolutely.
sacrifice, right? And maybe, you know, we were talking, you mentioned the wantrepreneurs. Maybe in a certain element, you know, that's what defines some from the others.
Sure.
But tell us, you know, let's talk about the hard stuff. Tell us about, can you recall or can you tell us about a hard challenge that as an entrepreneur in your design career that you've encountered and
Absolutely.
how you've overcome that?
Well, we like there's been so many challenges, right?
Mm.
But I've always said, don't dwell in the problem, bask in the solution. And because I've always had to, like, when you're looking at somebody who's quote unquote privileged, right?
Mhm.
And they come to you and be like, damn, oh man, I didn't get this, or this, that. And you're like, wow, like you're complaining about some of these things that like, I wish I could just grasp onto. And I'm like, and it's not that like, I'm not equipped or I'm not prepared. It's just like these things that you're complaining about, I wish I can have those complaints, but I'm not even I'm on the same level as you, right?
Yeah.
At this point, my peer beside me, I'm on the same level, but they're saying, wow, I didn't get enough time on the runway this scene for my for my show and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, man, I wasn't even invited to the party. So that's a great problem to have. But for me, going back to thinking of, I know what is out there, and I know what's out there and what's given to everybody, right?
Mhm.
And then I sit there and for people of color and Black designers in general, you create and you're going to release something, but in your head, it's already like a second muscle of knowing you're not going to get coverage and you're not going to get a second look. And you're used to that. It's like a muscle. Like it's one of those things that like you're so used to and you get used to it. So it's normal. That means you're not even looking for, oh, I'm going to get at least 2 hits this season. Like, so-and-so is going to come and so-and-so is going to, nobody's coming. And you already know that. So you're already preparing, knowing you're going to do. And this is where we go back to the graphic design and we go back to these disciplines that you've had to learn, not because maybe you wanted to learn, but is to fortify yourself to know that you're going to be alone anyways, to make sure that you could, when you're on that river or you're in the sea, you could fix your own engine.
Mhm.
You could fix your own rudder because nobody's coming. You get used to that and you get really good at it. So brand identity, graphic design, marketing, all these engines that people use to further themselves, I'm really good at. I get paid a lot of money to do it now. Is this something that I've ever wanted to do or I went to school for? No. Wait, you didn't go to school for none of it? No. I went to the school of hard knocks. These are what I'm talking about. We're talking about situations where, George, what did you go through, or these things that what did you, like the struggles? I didn't have
Mhm.
enough time to complain about them. I just had to build a solution for them and just keep on pushing until
Yeah,
maybe in the
figure it out.
world, whether the pigs fly or whatever, whatnot, something is going to change. I'm just gonna have to wait till the end of the world, because if it doesn't change, I'm gonna keep on going and do enough, even though there's a cap for me. There's some sort of a plateau, this weird plateau for people that look like me in this industry. I've sold at Town Shoes, I've sold at Hudson Bay, I've sold at Little Burgundy, I've sold at these big places, but there's always been a cap for me. So in the end, when you're asking about some sort of a struggle, of course it's always been, because I know for me, I know nobody's coming, but I know that I could still deliver something. And even if whether the color of my skin or take all that away, the product is sound. There's a
Mhm.
proof of concept that you cannot deny. And even though they'll throw the weeds, they'll throw soil, they'll bury it under a rock, it will always puncture through. And I've always helped push it through regardless, because you cannot stop somebody who can do their own marketing, who can catch their own pass. And this is one of these defense modes that I've had to build for myself, to make sure that even if I know that it's not cloudy outside, but they're holding the cloud on top of my head purposely, I can shift shape and just get around it. You know, like the Charlie Brown, the one, there's a
Yeah,
cloud.
yeah.
If,
Yeah.
if somebody is doing that to me, the greatest feeling for me is overcoming it, knowing that I can get around it. If you don't want to do my work as a graphic designer, and you don't want to do my work, then I'll do it myself. If you do not want to sell for me, I'll
Mm.
I'll sell it myself. I ended up becoming my vendor, my marketer, my seller, my promotions, my everything. But what was cool about it, I always made sure that it was the same and or better than my competition, who had all of that,
What
who
a
had
way to
all the
show them.
who had
Yeah.
all the accoutrements of what comes with privilege. So
And this is what I was about to lead you into with privilege. This is what comes. And I think what I'd like to help you do is to help us understand, help us unpack, because you and I have had the conversation, and I love your honest approach with all of that. And I think that, along with, if we can back it up, and I think that, with race being a huge challenge, kind of a something kind of like holding you back. I almost imagine it like a bungee elastic cord tied to your waist, and you're just like
absolutely,
running, trying to make it.
absolutely, that's a great analogy. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. And it really, with the recent, uh, what's been brought to light in the media since the pandemic with Black Lives Matters, and of course, knowing that you also are the founder of Black Designers of Canada. I mean, wow, that, and I guess that is an homage, or this ties into providing a platform for
Absolutely.
that community. But as a white person in the fashion industry, I find that, you know, I will say, oh, I'm not a racist, which is entirely the wrong thing, because I am blinded to the challenges and to the struggles that people of color face in the industry. And I was shocked. I was in awe when you and I had our first conversation. And I found it really enlightening. But to your point, your friend, colleague next to you will get that appointment weeks before you will.
Yeah, it's
And
it's 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 crazy. And because being in the industry this long, you know where the bones are buried. I know the buyers. I know the retailers. I know these guys. They know me. But it's one of those things that it's before the movement, or before these things have come where you have to face racism, because before this happened, there is no systemic racism in Canada. What are you talking about, George? There is no racism. Oh, it's only over there. Only over there. And
well,
and
like I said, your Canadians are very
oh
friendly
yeah,
or politely
the
racist.
politely racist, so politely racist. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the thing is that for us, unfortunately, I'll always equate systemic racism to carbon monoxide. You can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't touch it, but it kills. And have one person go to you and say, you know what, listen, could you sense it? Could you feel it? No. What are you talking about? But wait, like I get it in my throat, I get it in my thing, we should get out of here. Nah, you go, I'll stay, I don't see anything, there's nothing to see here. And we've been fighting that for the longest time. I like to call it like for myself, I know for myself, if I speak for myself, I've been designing in the dark with an arm tied behind my back, and throw in a knee on my neck for all these
Wow.
years, for all these years, every year 1, year 2, year 3. But how come George is penetrating the fact that he's tied up, he's ding the thing, and how come he's still doing this? It's because I've learned to catch my own past literally. I've learned to be able to play, to strengthen, and not everybody has that inner strength. Not everybody, there's a lot of people that I know that after starting Black Designers of Canada, they were calling me and saying, oh my God, George, like I thought I was going to quit. Nobody believes there's a problem here. And if there's no problem to solve, then there's no problem. And so we can't do anything about it. And for the first time in Canadian history ever, has Canada admitted to systemic racism and ownership of this. And there's a thing called Blackout Tuesday, and it was the day where everybody blacked out they put a black JPEG on their Instagram and said either muted or we're gonna listen, we're gonna stop talking and listen. That's when I said, there it is, George. After 42 years, I didn't say my name. I didn't say my name. After this time, the lights finally turned on, because finally there was admitting to something that nobody ever wanted to admit to, and wanting to have a really difficult conversation to have. This is difficult for my peers and friends that I have in the industry, white, Black, Chinese, Indigenous. This was hard for everybody to talk to. And so then for me, I'm like, this is it. Because if you're gonna wanna stop talking finally and listen, then I have something here, because there's a lot to say. There's a lot to be able to just roll out. And so Black Designers of Canada was one thing, but it was just really the truth of the matter. And I knew that the inspiration, half of it was the fact that I saw a lot of people, a lot of industry, a lot of retailers, a lot of buyers, a lot of photographers, a lot of people that would never work with me, because I already know. I know where the bones are buried. I know the attitudes. They were some of the first to put up a black JPEG and say, see, over there in America, bad, bad, bad. And no, bad on you. Because you're so polite, you almost out racist or out systemically tie yourself to this thing that is the elephant in the room, and you're tied to it. But it's one of those things that if nobody believes it exists, then it's hard for somebody like me to argue. Then you know what? If I'm one person, forget about one person. I know that there is more than 10 designers, because that was the thing, Janelle, like 90% of Canadians or people in the fashion industry believe that there was more than 10 designers, Black designers in Canada. As sad as that sounds, that's the general feeling, that there was that many. So I had a lot to go on to say, you know what? I'm actually going to play detective. I'm going to be Poirier or whatever. Yeah. And I'm going to find these facts, and I'm going to put a call out there and really prove that there's more than 10, more than 50, more than 100. I know that when I put the call out there, within 2 weeks, I got over 200 submissions of Black designers saying, oh my God, I'm here. And like, somebody put a call out to acknowledge me. Oh my God. And here it came. Acknowledgement for the first time. A first time Black designers can be counted for the first time. All these firsts. 8 months ago, if you typed Black designers, Canadian Black designers, nothing came up. 2 articles came out, I think one L and one something else, and it was in Black History Month. It was like during Black History Month. I'm not sure, like there was like 2, but that was it. That was it. So then that's when I'm just like, wow, this wasn't like 1950. This was 2019, early 2019. If you typed top 30 designers you need to know in Toronto, top 30 designers you need to know, there was maybe 2 Black designers.
Incredible.
And it was the same ones that they use, the tokens, the same ones that they're like, okay, well, as long as we use these 2 designers, then we're covered. And I'm not going to even name them, because they don't even deserve that, because they already know that they've been used that in that way. So I'm not going to raise more energy to that, because they know that they've been used as tokens. They win the same awards every year as the only 2 designers that need to win those awards. And that is because out of the 160 on our website now, you will find over 50 cut and sew, runway ready, contemporary, modern contemporary. You'll find every denomination. And before we talk about that Black designers only do athleisure, there's only 4 athleisure brands on the whole site. So then what? There goes another one, another Mythbuster. Mythbuster George, they call me now. Mythbuster George. Anyways,
Mythbuster
I'm,
George.
I'm going on, but just to say, like, this is what it feels like to know that there's a race going on and they put you on the other side of the fence. We're not
Yeah.
looking for more. This is not a charity. Don't want it. Don't need it. I'm Black excellence. You're looking at it. I don't need it. All I want is equal footing. And I want to run that race that everyone else is running. Just let me line up, whether I win or lose, as long as you let me line up. And hey, there is fear because wow, all these these BIPOCs are coming to the, hey, who let them on the race course? We've been just doing this for years. Who are these guys now with the shoes and they got all this equipment and man, this kind of sucks. What's going on here? Hey, listen, those are those kicking and screaming saying, we like it this way. But then there's others of my peers that I love, white, Black, Chinese, indigenous, that are saying, thank God, because I was at this job and there was a lot of whispers and I hated that, so I quit. And or there's so many people that are here to support us, white people supporting this thing because they always understood it wasn't fair, but whether they did something about it or not, I'm getting apologies for that. I got a lot of friends in the industry saying, you know what, I was tethered
I was
to
part
something
of
that
that.
I didn't like, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't like that, but my editor or my this and my that was telling me no, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And just let us run that race. And it's gonna be tough seeing some new competitors that look really ready, weirdly, really ready to run. And
you mean they weren't born yesterday doing it?
Right. And you're gonna have to let run because part of the fear is saying, you know what, we actually know George Sully is really dope. And we've known that guy is really, really thing. But there's been a lot of appropriation of saying, taking George's stuff and other designers' stuff and reboxing it, repackaging it, and giving it to these brands easier to digest from a white designer. So it's one of those things that, like, and I know that I'm not to even feel guilty that I'm part of anything, but to know that I'm a businessman. So having a designer come to me, a white designer, saying, hey, George, I don't know much about shoes, don't know much about clothing, but I got the money and my mom really wants to see me make a dress. And I'm like, okay, you want to make a dress? Boom. Yeah, here's your patterns, here's your this, here's your that, here's your connections, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, I watch designer X fly within 6 months, top 3 designers of Canada, and guess who has their hands behind that? A guy who looks like this does. A lot of the times, a guy who looks like this is part of some of the biggest infrastructures and some of the biggest brands that you'll know, even Canadian. I could take a lot of credit for at least 7 brands that you love right now. And they came to me with lesser knowledge, with lesser anything, but the difference that separated us is what we look like in 2020.
That's crazy. It's crazy. And I think, and even thinking about the work that needs to be done, and I'm really happy to see, because when you and I first spoke, I mean, I felt like you were on a worldwide tour from your living room because your schedule was jam-packed with news and broadcasting interviews. And I think I even told you, I said, George, I think what you're doing is phenomenal because, with so much compassion and love, you're helping the world understand systemic racism and awaken, because I've never, and I'm sorry to use this term, I've never considered myself a racist, but now realize that I've also fed into the system. And I think this is what this is all about. And like you said, it's not about, it's not about getting more and wanting more. It's about leveling out the playing field and evening out the race and no one getting a head start. And there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen. And as I'm hearing you speak, I'm literally getting shivers because it's painful. The realization of, as a privileged white person, of having fed into this is painful. It's shameful. it's raw. And it's a very difficult conversation that a lot of people, that we need to be honest and have with ourselves in doing the work. And I'm happy to see, because my fear when you and I last spoke was, man, like this is a hot topic right now. And I sure hope that it doesn't just fade out into the dark. I really hope that it is here to stay. But what is being done?
Right.
What has to be done? And what is the work that's required to level out that playing field? And as a father, as a parent, how can I teach this to my kids? How can I make sure that the younger generations are there, learning the proper way of living and doing things, and hopefully not having that elastic bungee cord tied to the waist
Absolutely.
holding them
Absolutely.
back.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy that you and I are sitting here having this conversation and seeing that the topic is just as relevant now as it was a few months ago.
Absolutely. And it's going to continue. What's happening, and again, what's different than any other time before, is accountability. And even if you put that black JPEG we were talking about earlier and you put it out there, it's kind of like, it's the first paper trail that we've ever had for somebody to say, you know what, yes, as of today, I'm going to, profess, my love for black designers, and I'm going to buy black, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it's kind of like, it's a double-edged sword, because not only is there a paper trail, but this kind of like a reminder of what you said. And even if you could erase it if you'd like to, but even, in this cancel culture right now, people have probably recorded or screen grabbed yours, ready to use it against you. And even if that's how it starts, even if corporations now, even if, the person that is taking care of their Instagram was the one who put the black JPEG for their company, saying, hey, I know the boss is going to thank me later. The boss is still tied to that. And accountability, whether you like it or not, it's not going to go away, simply because for the first time, it's kind of like, but you said. And fright is going to get you over the other side. If being on the right side of this, you have to be scared into being on the right side, again, that's fine. But that's how it's going to start. And that's how it's already been starting. There's a lot of brands out there that they weren't really looking to change anything. But then this came, and you have to be on the right side of history on this. And then
look at what's happened to some of the major sporting brands, athletic brands in the US. I mean, it's a huge call to arms on
it's a
their end.
huge call to arms. And this is what we're talking about, because if people at home might be listening to this and saying, George, here we go, not everyone's listening to these violins. We don't want the violins. These are cannons. And it's because the cannons is really the financing. And it's kind of like when you threaten a major corporation and you threaten their money, this is all of a sudden they'll come to Jesus. Because if they didn't come to Jesus with their heart and soul, they're going to come because of their wallets. And this is how it's happening. So then the smart thing that people have done is kind of saying, like, the LeBrons and so on and so forth, and saying, you know what, we're just not going to play, because we know that the man upstairs who doesn't really give up about black people and or the game, but just their wallet and just their team, the ownership of the team, and they lose $1 billion or a quarter of this XX because the players didn't play. All of a sudden they want to turn stadiums into voting booths, so on, like massive. All of a sudden, this is the come to Jesus, but it came because of the wallet. And you know what? That's okay. It doesn't matter how you come to the dance. Just come to the dance ready to bring your dancing shoes, because you're gonna dance. Right. and that's how I'm coming. I'm not coming with violence. I'm not coming with I hope that everybody listens, or hope that this doesn't go away. The protection is that it's not going to go away, because every single time your favorite celebrity, your star, that is the engine to what you love, your music, your entertainment, all these beautiful things that you take for granted. And the engine looks like us. So we sit there together and say, Eureka, let's just stop it here. All of a sudden, the biggest people you would never... People have apologies on television. People that would have never thought to say, I'm sorry, I know what this is, and I stand. And all the people now kneeling now, but they weren't kneeling with Colin Kaepernick before. Team owners now and coaches and everybody kumbaya. It's because they cut the money. They cut the money, and everyone from the top tier saying, John, everybody kneels today. I like my wife, she's pissed. We lost, we're losing the cottage, the bills, the helicopters. John, tell everybody to kneel.
Do you think this is genuine? Do you think that, and I'm glad that these major corporations are now, you know, having to respond, having to admit. But is it what the world needs? Is it genuine? Simply because it's tugged on the wallet strings?
It's a great question. At this point, it doesn't matter, because change comes as it comes. Like the world is an ugly place. It doesn't come with roses and bows and unicorns. It comes with war, blood, all these things. You know what? Like, did change come for, you know, in 1960 or the 1950s of these marches? Change it came in blood. It came in death. So this change is going to come in the same way, maybe a different, you know, it's going to come in a different way, but it's not going to come pretty. It's going to come this way first. And then some people come to Jesus, because doing it this way, it shakes enough people. The infrastructure, yes, but it's the people that are watching and saying, why are they stopping? Or why is even the coach? I'm for the coach never kneeling. But then wait a second, that person who doesn't care about the plight of Black people, who loves to watch the Cowboys play, has to stop and sit there and be like, why are they stopping? Why am I not watching my game today? Why? And then it just might hit them a little bit. Along the lines, a couple of years later, they'll be like, you know what? Maybe they might listen, but for all the one person who doesn't, there's the 10 or the 5, and the change begins to happen. And oh yeah, then the coaches, then the owners say, wait a second, this was pretty cool, because while we stopped the games, there was more jackets bought. There was more footballs bought and more basketballs bought. Wow, this is really actually cool to work with Black people.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Because during all the time that we've never accepted or never brought them to the game or never let them race, we thought we were okay. But then we all came to Jesus. Some came because they wanted to. Some came tugged. We made more money. We made more inclusion equals dollars. Oh my God, mind blown.
Mind blowing.
So look at that. We just, like, all these great things have just happened if you just took the ignorance out, the prejudices out. And then all of a sudden everyone's making more money. Wow. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's get as many Black people doing all these type of really cool things like us.
Right.
And
right.
while we were already doing it, it's just we were doing it with the lights turned off, the arm behind our backs, and the proverbial knee on our necks the whole time through. And I have so many examples. There's examples of directly how I've been affected. And I have so many. So it's kind of like, yeah, George, but yeah, I'm a Canadian. And I just can't fathom him having a problem in Canada with the maple syrup and the canal.
And the poutine.
Like the poutine. And if you try the poutine, I swear, there's nothing like that ever.
True.
Listen,
so true.
It's one of those things that, like, I've gotten so many apologies, and I didn't ask for them, but I got them. And I just kind of like, and these conversations with friends that have never even asked me, George, like, man. And I'm not an alien. I've been here, I've been in the industry, so I don't need like a rub on the head or a pat, like a poor George or anything. I'm just not looking for that. I'm more than capable. I'm more than experienced. I didn't go to school for what I've learned, but it's really great when you have students that come from UFT or Humber, or like these institutions coming to look for a job for me.
Yeah.
It's a compliment. And I'll give you a job. But the first thing I'll tell you is take those paperwork. And if you thought that that's what attracted me to you, I'll just take the paperwork. Thank you for coming. Nice. And like, but George, but what are you doing? But I didn't even tell you what I did. No, it's okay because I'll ask you what's your favorite drink, and they'll be like, "What are you talking about?" Is this a trick question? Because I'm gonna be like, most of the disarming happens at these watering holes when nobody else is looking. Most of these contracts that I get or these collaborations that we get are places where the most disarming happens when we're having a drink. So if you're my assistant and we're dealing with certain people who love to sit in there and drink, if you can get 5 shots and still write down what you need to write down to lock this deal down, then I'll probably need more of your what you could take and drink in than what you have on your paperwork that you were taught by a teacher that was just theory and not real practice. I'm an entrepreneur. Theory, yes, but real-time practice and real-time situations is what determines whether you eat or you don't, whether you make your rent or you don't. So it's
100%.
kind of all these things, right? All these things.
Mm-hmm.
Before I go on another mission, these.
It's no, I mean, it's incredible. And to hear, I guess, your train of thought with regards to that, you know, I worried about that. I worried about how, are the efforts genuine? Those apologies that you received, is it because, well, it's the topic du jour, and you know, it's those things. But I love how you said, like, doesn't matter how they came and how this happened and the fact that their purse strings were pulled. It still got us to where we need to be in having those courageous conversations.
Absolutely.
And in the work that needs to be done to unlearn, in the work that needs to be done towards racial justice, in the small steps, what can be done? I mean, one of the things that we haven't even touched on is 15% privilege. You know, but what can be done? And from, you know, I think that as entrepreneurs, as retailers, as suppliers, as people of influence in the fashion industry, how can we help?
Well,
With
I think like I said before, I think that we can do what we do, right? Again, put our hands together and, you know, we can have workshops and we can have resources and do all these other things. But I think we touched on the fact that it's going to get better because it's the eureka moment of saying that we're not taking away from your money or away from your business. We're actually adding to your business and adding more money to the proverbial engine. So it's just now going to happen. It's kind of like, wow, we're making money. So this is good.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that, then us on the, like, because that's the engine, right? So the engine is the corporations and all these other people that are making, we're like little ants. And you know, when you put your finger and you're watching an ant walk and you put your finger there, the ant has to go around.
Yeah.
We are the ant, and the corporations are the ones that are making these decisions for us. And now all of a sudden they're saying, oh, this is going to work because we're making a lot of money. And guess what? Us, the ants, I don't have to be called an ant. No, nobody would like to be called an ant. But for the sake of talking,
yeah.
We say, oh, this is really cool because this thing that we're walking around has all these glowing things and these kumbayas because they're saying it's okay, so it's okay for us. So when you go to work tomorrow and your boss says this is okay, you're like, yeah, I believe that too. I've always believed that, but it's so great that you believe that because now I can go home because before I hated your thoughts because my boss was a racist, but I had to keep my job because I need to eat. So isn't it great that your boss now has come to a kumbaya and then now he's talking about get as many Black designers in this store as you can. And then you say yes, because you're the ant and unfortunately you have to walk whatever the glowing ball that the corporation has made for us to. And it starts there, which is always the nasty. It's the sausage making. You don't like, nobody likes to see how the sausage is made.
No.
And then, but we all like to eat it, despite the calories. And so here we are. And I would love to say, you know what, this is what we can do to do better. And you know what, buy Black and, you know, Now you're
Mhm.
going to be buying black because you're forget about you what you thought about buying black. The store you went to that you didn't know was a racist owner is going to have black items for you to buy from already. You see, it's kind of like I can tell you these things, but I'd rather work on the infrastructure and let everybody else fall in line, even the people who have kind hearts, because you still have to buy you're not making your own milk. You have to go to the store to buy your milk. And if there
True.
is no milk, you'll get almond milk. If there's not almond milk, you'll get soy. If there's not soy, you're the ant. You're an ant.
I love your analogies. Analogies really resonate with me huge. I speak in analogies all the time,
Yeah,
but your analogies are fantastic
that's
for
all.
that.
It's just that way because okay, take all that aside and take the corporations
Hmm.
and how they're kind of muscling us into these channels.
Hmm.
What we can do, of course, support your local designers. If you're a designer yourself, collaborate with others. Collaboration used to
Hmm.
be a bad word because everybody kind of held their everything to themselves. There wasn't enough food for everybody to eat, so nobody wanted to share anything.
Yeah.
But social media came and the gatekeepers have started to fall because of all the social media, YouTube. You could literally make your own career without having to use any of these gatekeepers and these stores, and you can have so amazing that way. And
Hmm.
so support each other and do these things that now you don't need the corporate entity to do really anything. You could make your first million without having to be in a department store. You could do so many other things that you do not need the monster with the tentacles and like the three heads, you know what I mean? And so on and so forth. And these are these cool things that I would say to people, or how to and how do we keep this alive, or how do we do better? Um, just naturally support each other. Support
Yeah.
each other. If you're white, black, and it doesn't matter what ethnicity, it's just if it's good and it's the qualities there that meets what you feel, and then but then I want you to think deeper and be like, if the quality of what the perception was that a quality is lesser because, well, think of the opportunities they never really got. They never got invited to the race to get to understand the right shoes to wear. So let's talk about let's talk about places where we can make sure they have the right shoes. And that's what Black Designers of Canada for sure, because these are the next levels of things that I want to do. Not just make it an index, but really have resources to make sure that, okay, guys, all line up. We need to make sure, why do you need the right shoes? Because you're going to be running against X, Y, and Z. You need the right
Hmm.
shoes. You need the right talk. You need the right education to make sure that when you run that race, and there's only one place to run, and that race is with everybody else. So there's only one race, not different races, just one big, huge line. And to race on that line and be prepared is what I want to make sure, because I don't want these big department stores to come back and say, you see, George, yes, you brought 160 designers, but only 2 were really ready, and then the other wasn't EDI
Hmm.
compliant. They didn't even know what that was.
I
They
know
didn't even
that
know what
world.
that. They didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
They didn't even know.
Oh my gosh. I
You
love
know,
I love how you just inject a bit of humor into that.
and
Absolutely.
this is what I want to make sure they did, because I don't want them to come back and say, "See, George, there you go.
Yeah.
Tried
Yeah.
tried to get us
Yeah.
tried to trap us, but we dug for your designers. We only told you there was 10. That's what we
Yeah.
meant. There was only 10 that were ready. No, 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 no. I'm not gonna let you get away with that. I want to make sure that designers, and it's gonna take somebody courageous out there, if they're listening out there,
Hmm.
to come in and say, I not only I can help, but instead of just this, bring in the dollars for the infrastructure. We need these
Hmm.
things. And because that's what we don't want to listen to no more, because that's when, after it's cool and then the cool dies of this topic and it dies off, that's the people that are just talking. The people that are
Hmm.
ready to actually help build some infrastructure and to help create some sort of a foundation are the ones that are really truly here for us, and it's going to help us continue this path. And that's and that's the most important thing of all, right?
George, I can't even begin to thank you enough. And before we wrap up, I
Time
want
is
to
already
share one of,
been an hour and a
oh,
half.
I know time flies when you're having fun.
Absolutely.
But I want to share one of my favorite quotes from you with
Sure.
all of your multitude of analogies. But really, it was very meaningful. It's not just about inviting us to the table. It's acknowledging the fact that we helped build the legs for which it stands.
Absolutely. That's an
Powerful.
original.
It is, I know.
That's
Thank you for your contributions towards the world,
pleasure.
towards our unlearning, our understanding, and our education towards racial justice.
Pleasure.
I really am looking forward to seeing the new projects that you're going to be working on. I feel like we haven't even touched the surface on a multitude of subjects. So we'll have to have you back for sure. I've said this before, but there's so much more that I want to unpack with you. And from the bottom of my heart, George, thank you so much for your time, and thank
Absolutely.
you for being with us today. All right, take care.
Okay. See you.